Here we are again with this week's episode of the Long Only Podcast. I'm Doug.
Hi, Doug.
Hi, Gerry. You're Gerry.
Hi, Doug.
I think we're on episode 85 right now. 85
We are 85 what?
episodes.
Oh, my goodness.
Yes. All right, we're going to skip the market commentary today because there's really not much new to say under the sun. As we were driving home from lunch, Gerry was berating me, giving my normal weekly dressing down, and said there was nothing new under the sun.
With self-loathing is just not going to work.
But anyway, what can we say? So let's not even say it. We're not going to talk about the F word. We're going to talk about something we haven't discussed, at least not since we've been to video, and it's been a while. Yeah. Don't say it.
Don't say it. Okay,
Don't say it. We're going to talk about crypto. We have a stake in crypto indirectly, not necessarily. Our use for it is a little broader, but Gerry can speak to that. And crypto's done pretty well lately, and I think that it's worth digging into and seeing separate hype versus fact with this asset class. And it seems like the government's plan has been to try to hope that it goes away. That hasn't worked, and I think that does seem to speak well for many of the coins that are still around. I feel good about the things that have survived this long. They're probably going to be around for a while longer.
It's very similar to what we said back in the .com era, where there was thousands of people that could barely fog a mirror, just had .com in their name and they were getting value. Is there will be a handful of winners in the end, and that's been the case. Amazon.com.
Yep.
And so similar things with the crypto world. I think what's happening is, the regulatory thing seems to have been sort of kicked down the road by the SEC. They've said, well, we're on to other things now, and crypto's going to have to wait. Well, crypto isn't waiting. In fact, the rest of the world, this isn't going to be a treatise on regulation of crypto, but the rest of the world seems to be moving on from a regulatory standpoint as far as they've addressed, they've addressed the issues. They've come up with some rules. I don't know that that's complete, but they have addressed it far better than the U.S. regulatory authorities. What is it? I mean, there may even be a turf war, I guess, going on between the CFTC, the Commodity Futures Trading Commission, and the SEC over, who actually should be regulating this. But that has to do with, well, is it a currency? Is it a security? We've long contended that there's aspects of all of the above, and then some. But I think what's happening now.
But Gerry, if I could just say something, is the resident non-crypto expert in the room?
I'm not I'm just observing.
Well, I'm less of one. So of course we're talking about it because two non-experts talking. But it seems to me that part of the problem with crypto is to try to put it in a box of something that already exists when it's its own thing.
That's exactly right. And I don't think what is a crypto expert? I mean, there's so many aspects of this, and we've always said the really important part of it is distributed computing, which is, blockchain, no centralized, depository for all of this stuff, if you will. Some of this terminology may not even be spot on correct in the way I'm using it, but it's close enough. I mean, it's distributed, it's not centralized. This is something that I think more and more the world is becoming enamored with, and just Bitcoin, which we've kind of gone back and forth on our views on Bitcoin over the years. I think in general, we're favorable or we're positive that it's happened because it's, in 2009, it opened the floodgates to this phenomenon. There's shortcomings, the lack of scalability, which ultimately, without getting into great detail, I think is ultimately the reason why it never will truly become money. Or from that matter, a store of value, although there are those and reasonable people will disagree on that. But with this extreme volatility and without the ability to have I guess what you say, a proper scaling mechanism, because contrary to what people who are on the side of sound money often believe, is you do still have to have the ability to increase purchasing media or currency when needed, when the growth of the economy is such that more money is needed. So proper scaling mechanism is necessary. What that actually is also debatable, but at least an attempt at it. And Bitcoin with its $21 million cap, which I think there are those that say in the year 2100, that's going to be, I guess that's the time. That's sort of the guess as to when we reach 20. I think it's like 18 something million now, but it's, because it's solving for prime numbers, it gets harder and harder and harder and harder to do that. So it slows the growth down. That non-inflationary aspect of it is the reason why it's doing well in this environment where fiat currencies like the US dollar and every other major foreign currency in the world have suffered versus Bitcoin.
Well, it's been my reductionist contention that the value in Bitcoin is not so much what it is. Well, a big part of Bitcoin's value or any digital currency is what it's not. And it's not a fiat currency.
It's not a fiat currency.
Self-limiting gives it some value.
And it, it's not going away. It's going to be, it probably will go up in value in this, kind of desire to have this sort of almost a novelty to some extent. And it did, but I don't want to be flippant about it to the extent that some do, which is, it's worthless. There is a value there. It's just, it didn't get it got part of the story right. It didn't get the story completely right. It's got part of the mechanism, not all of the mechanism. But I think what we're experiencing right now, and again, I'm going to emphasize, I don't think anybody's an expert. We've been watching this for over 10 years. I bought my first Bitcoin in 2013, I believe it was, and have been just impersonally, and I have been watching this phenomenon over these 10 plus years, and it's going to take another 10 years or so to get to where this is more ubiquitous and that we've got some of these scalability issues solved, but it's getting solved. And I think to a large extent in the last few years, there's been somewhat of a separation of the men from the boys, so to speak. Can you say that still? I don't know. I was about to catch myself on that. I said it.
I won't edit it out. We may confuse some listeners, but
yeah. And so point being is that some real use cases, I think Ethereum, which is commonly called a level two token, which was a platform for developing blockchains, and using the Ethereum blockchain. And now there's other Solana, Cardano, that are coming up with even more value in some cases, or at least more features to them than even the Ethereum platform or the Ethereum blockchain has. Ethereum is still very widely used, and it will continue to be, I think. But the point is that with many of these tokens now, we're seeing the ones that had real utility, and we have experience. Doug, you mentioned earlier, I think you mentioned something about our experience with this, which is in our private company holding Otoy, who built a render network for rendering computer graphics images based on a distributed network of GPUs, responsible for building this network. And we always said, wow, that's a great use case for blockchain for artists and videographers. Videographers, I guess. Yeah. People creating content in 3D, CG, computer graphics imagery, and using Otoy's render software to render their art, if you will, which requires extremely powerful graphics processors units, which are the chips that allow for graphics to happen. For anybody watching this, there's millions and millions of pixels on your screen that are operating at the same time. It's what we call a massively parallel system, which is now, because it's so valuable for complex computation, it's being used for things like artificial intelligence, machine learning. And so this network is really proving to be quite valuable. And the render token, which was issued as the means to be able to transact on this network and originally was built on the Ethereum platform, and they just are moving towards the Solana platform this last fall. Allows for a distributed network of graphics processors to exist and be accessed by people who want to do these various types of rendering or high performance computing jobs. It's a phenomenal idea that Otoy came up with.
Wait, but you said something important there, because we stumbled across this. Originally started as a rendering thing. Is the high performance computing, that could be a lot of different things, right? And was that something that was just recently sort of stumbled upon, or do you think that was an intended use all along? It doesn't really matter. It's all academic. It's just that the serendipity effect.
It was. I honestly don't know if Otoy had that in the back of their mind ever. Originally, it was originally meant for, because they are a computer graphics rendering, streaming, creating software company. They built this to be able to have to gain access to build a network of GPUs, because GPUs are a hot commodity. They always knew it would be. Even I don't even think to the extent that it's become a really hot commodity. I don't know that they even envisioned that it is that the demand for these GPUs is as great as it has become, or they didn't necessarily see it being as great as it has become, but it's making this network very valuable. I mean, the token itself is over $2 billion recently, almost $3 billion value just for the token itself, for the network. So it's a good valuation, and of course Otoy owns a significant portion of that network, those tokens. So it's a validation of the value of that network. And if you think of it, this is just scratching the surface. I mean, if these are, and to give some scale, I don't know have the exact number, but if say there's 100,000 GPUs available on this network, this is on its way to millions and tens of millions potentially of GPUs, because theoretically, at some point, every GPU, and this is a progression that's happening, but every GPU that's out there, including one that's on my iPhone here, could be potentially, for lack of a better term, rented on the network and used. And if I were to do that, my iPhone GPU is earning me rent, or I'm like a landlord. Or it's better than that. It's like Airbnb for GPUs. I'm going to throw my GPU out on the Airbnb. The render network is Airbnb for GPUs.
And what investing show would be complete without an Airbnb metaphor? So
let's say it's a VRBO metaphor. Either way,
totally different.
Yeah. Okay.
It makes the point, though.
It makes the point. So we're super excited, because just one little aspect of our investment in that company is now, showing a value, trading regularly, worth well over $2 billion, over $2 billion, between 2 and 3 billion on any given day. It's volatile, but it's proven. The point I'll make with this, and then we'll end it, because we're not spend too much time on this, but it's proving value. It's proving utility. It's proving that there's a reason for these blockchain-based tokens to exist. I would argue that this is one of the best use cases I've seen. And that's what we always said, was that there would be real uses for this. Well, here's a live example.
And I think that if you have some sort of digital currency and cryptocurrency, if you will, and it survived the so-called crypto winter, and it's demonstrated an actual utility, you have to be feeling pretty good about its long-term prospects, as is the case with this one. So
absolutely. I mean, as much as these chips are required, and someday there will probably be other things that could be other forms of chip, if you will, to be available on a network like this. It's proving the point, and there's way more to this than I could possibly ever explain. It does. I mean, some of this gets very complicated. It's the geniuses at Otoy that put this together truly are that. They've thought about things like why it's important for an artist to have digital rights management and smart contracts that are attached to. So when there's an entry on the blockchain, it's not just that transaction took place. Oh, it's that transaction, and there's a contract associated with that transaction that proves that work is that artist's. So it's interesting stuff.
It's worth noting that this has been an investment. We could be guilty of talking our own book. So be aware, we are invested in this, and but this is something we've been invested in for a while, and it's also worth noting that it took a fair amount of foresight because the GPUs have only started to become ubiquitous in the last few years. This is something they've been ramping up for years.
Of the problem is that they aren't ubiquitous. They're in great demand, and they're still pretty expensive. They haven't gone quite by Moore's law, in that the cost of them has cut in half every 18 months. It's that they're still expensive, and the reasons for that are myriad, and we could spend hours talking about it. But the fact is that it looks like you're always going to want more and more of these things, just like you wanted more and more CPUs, the central processor units, which are what traditionally silicon is built upon, or I should say the CPU is built upon silicon. When you traditionally talk about silicon, you're thinking CPUs. This is the graphics processor component of that. But nonetheless,
it seems fitting that in this day and age, no one's even listening to Moore's law. Even that law is being broken. So, post 2020 America.
To an extent.
So that puts the crypto segment of today's show to bed. Not that we do crypto every week, but we took a 15-minute detour to talk about crypto today. We are going to now take another dive into Gerry's cooking and cheap dating show. We're just going to take a quick 5 minutes as we wrap up the week here, and do what we did.
Go ahead.
Well, last week we talked about the latte or the espresso effect as seen by Gerry Frigon, who, while he can afford his latte and afford his espresso, wants to set an example for the kids out there who are trying to get by on a shoestring, and also point out that you don't need to do these things at a store or pay for them by the cup in order to get good value. So he's going to apply the do-it-yourself model to the steak dinner.
I would say that the steak dinner applies to much more than the young people out there. Surely, because even they are recognizing that, a run to the local steakhouse is probably not in the cards for them very often, if at all. But it's still, the value proposition is still there for anybody, myself included, you, anybody. And it's while it's fun and nice and enjoyable to go out with your wife to a nice dinner at a steakhouse, the costs are just outrageous now.
Wait, can we say wife in 2024? Are we allowed to say that?
Yeah, I said men, separating men from boys.
Yeah, exactly. We're already.
I think it's okay to say that.
Okay, all right, just making sure.
It doesn't matter. I don't care. So this latest one, we did some pretty good numbers on this, or calculations on the exact costs. So I love filet mignon. It's not that I don't like more flavorful steaks that are, higher in fat and taste really good, but I'm willing to put up with a little bit of the taste. Does put a lot of salt and pepper on it, and for the texture and the tenderness of a filet mignon. So love filet mignon. So it's not outside the realm of reason in any, steakhouse that now, especially with costs being where they are, you just order a 8-ounce filet mignon and it could be $60-$70, and you get a plate with a filet mignon on it. And then if you want anything to go with it, okay, cha-ching, 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 and you want a glass of wine or two, $20 a pop. Easy to get over $100 per person for a decent steak dinner. So we decided, all right, we're going to try to do this all at home, and which we would do anyway sometimes, but not as much as we will now, because we did the exact numbers, and even for us, it's like, oh my gosh. Cutting to the chase. So plug for Costco, which we own. So it's good to plug Costco in our income strategy. But by the way, I think most people know they have great meat department at Costco. So we got our filet mignon at Costco. And I think we actually got most of it. We happen to be running the gamut at Costco with rice, broccoli, salad, 2 glasses of wine apiece. I'm very into Italian wines right now. So it was a nice Montepulciano that we got. And I paid $11 for a bottle of Montepulciano at, I can never get it right. Doug, is it Wine and Things? I think it is.
I think we decided it's Total Wine.
Total Wine. Okay. And I'm sure you could get more expensive ones. And some people might say, oh, wow, only $10, $11 bottle, it can't be very good. You know, it was really good. So I put that to bed right now.
Trust me, Gerry knows wine.
Coming from the wine country of the Central Coast of California, I've had many a solid, very, long-term wine people who said you should never pay more than $10 a bottle for a bottle of wine. Anyway, everything else is marketing. Cut to the chase. We added it all up. Literally 8 ounces at how X cost per pound turns into X cost per ounce. How much rice we had, how much broccoli we had, how much salad we had, and what that all costs. I'm going to ask you, Doug, what do you think that cost? Well, I think I already told you all.
You told me yesterday, so I'm going to put myself in the shoes of the Doug Conley who did not know what it cost, because I don't remember perfectly
per person.
But if you told me what it cost per person, I would have guessed probably somewhere between $20 and $30 a person.
$12
all right,
per person.
Okay. And
we could even put a candle between the two of us for a little romantic effect. It's stark. So imagine how much money. And we didn't even do the numbers on what we did with the espresso latte, where, if you did it every day and instead of going to the Starbucks, you did it yourself. And it was like, I think we came up with like 1,700 change worth of dollars saved a year, which for the young person, put that in the mutual fund, the Taylor Frigon Core Growth Fund all day long. Plug for us. And you're going to do really well over time if you were to do that, just that part of it every year. So imagine when you start incorporating things like, a steak dinner. Now, if you were to go, I think that was $19.99 a pound, something like that. Might have even been less, but the number was $12 per person. So for 8 ounces, you could do the math to figure out what the exact cost is. I can't remember per pound on the steak, on the filet mignon. But the best deal is pork. Oh my gosh, I think it was like $2.99 a pound, and that's for the really nice, big, thick. I feel like Julia Childs. Does anybody remember Julia Childs?
I don't think there's an S, isn't it? Julia Child.
Julia Childs.
Julia Child.
Julia Child. Is it just?
There's no S. I don't
Julia
think.
Child. You remember her?
Yeah, she's one who talked weird, right?
Yeah. I remember her growing up as the kind of cooking guru. I guess maybe is it Martha Stewart now?
She was kind of like even a more high pitched version of Maggie Smith from Downton Abbey. But anyway.
Yes. Yeah. But it's Gordon Ramsay has done this kind of stuff. But he doesn't really get into the cost. He should. And this wasn't my idea. I can't even remember who it was that came up with this idea of comparing things like this when you do it yourself. But I think it's phenomenal. So you can imagine. You could just get down the cost from 12. Consider, filet mignon is kind of the top of the line for anybody. So start moving down to, chicken, a lesser cut of steak. Like I think we bought some tri-tip, which is a Central Coast of California favorite. That's where it was coined. I think that was like $6.99 a pound. And we love tri-tip. Put it in the Traeger, slow cook it. It's great. So you can get those costs down. I bet you when you're figuring in pork, it's probably something like, $6 or $5 per plate. So think about what, if you were doing stuff like that instead of going out 3 times in a week or 4, or some people do that, or some people are out every night. Imagine the savings. If you could be disciplined to take that money instead and put it into your account, you're going to do really, 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 really well over 10, 15, 20 years. This is why it's so important for 20-somethings, 30-somethings, even 40-somethings, heck, even 50-somethings, any age actually, to save that kind of money. And it's fun. It's actually fun to do that yourself. That's the food segment, the foodie segment.
Okay. Food segment is done. The show is done. 85 is done. Remember to view us at taylorfrigon.com, get information about firm, mutual fund. Also, email the show long only at taylorfrigon.com. Instagram is taylorfrigon.invest. And until next week, I'm Doug.
I'm Gerry.
Thank you for joining us on the Long Only Podcast.